Now, over in Britain, investigators are still poring over evidence related to Monday's deadly bombing in Manchester. Police now say it is clear that the prime suspect was part of some kind of network. But the attack is also sparking a fierce debate over the effects of political correctness in the age of terrorism. In a Facebook post, Manchester-born singer Morrissey said, quote, "In modern Britain, everyone seems petrified to officially say what we all say in private." He went on to say Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham says the attack is the work of an extremist. An extreme what? An extreme rabbit? He also called out British Prime Minister Theresa May, as well as the Queen. And back here in the States, the bombing is reviving calls for a travel ban. But can we stop terrorism if we all have to be politically correct? Let me take it to the party panel. Tonight, it's Fox News specialist host Kat Timpf, joined by the Daily Beast and the Week columnist Anthony Fisher, and U.S. News editor at the Wall Street Journal, Glenn Hall. Welcome back, everyone.
Yay!
So what does he talk about? What are we saying in private that our dear leaders won't say out loud?
Well, I think there's this element that we saw even during the 2016 election here in the U.S., where will you say radical Islamist, right? And this idea that by saying so you indict an entire religious culture. But I think the President Trump has, he won in part by saying that's BS, and I'm not going to do that. And even now he says, I'm not going to use the names that would flatter them. I'm going to call them what they are. And we saw that in his response to the terrorism in the UK. Using a religion to justify acts of terror, I think you've got to call it out.
All right, so, obviously you have followed Smiths and Morrissey for years. So I am as well. And I actually think this kind of candor is refreshing. He's never been one to hold back his opinions. But is it that culture has reached critical mass when we talk about things, because it happened in his hometown? Has there been some sort of a breaking point? Because I think that happens with a lot of people. Or are these the rantings of a conservative older gentleman?
I wouldn't say Morrissey would identify himself on the right. I think he's always He's always been a man on the left, but he's also publicly gone off half-cocked for 30 years whenever he gets mad. He's wished death on many world leaders, including his own prime ministers and American presidents, given whatever controversy is big at the time. I think he's having an emotional reaction. It's totally fine. And I think you can have it a lot of different ways here. You can actually call it out as Islamist-based terror, as we would have called out IRA terrorism and have called out IRA terrorism in the UK in the past. But when he talks about immigration being the problem, this was a Manchester-born terrorist. So you can puncture the bubble of political correctness. You can have an honest conversation and not completely freak out and overreact about immigration.
And the UK is arguably our greatest global ally. We're not going to stop people from Great Britain coming over and visiting and getting tourist visas, but you have plenty of people in countries that we're aligned with who are essentially, if they're not terrorists now, they are trying and willing to be very shortly.
Absolutely. And the political correctness thing is a big thing. With San Bernardino, there was neighbors who saw things and didn't really want to say anything because they were worried they'd be called Islamophobic. But what really bothers me is when people use, well, you're just being politically correct if you try to make a civil liberties argument. There's people who actually want the FBI to be going into mosques and interrogating people who are actual citizens.
And cracking iPhones.
And cracking iPhones. And if you say, oh, well, you can't do that, they'll say, well, what, are you just being PC? And it's like, no, we are 2 steps away from having to get like an anal probe every time we go to a baseball game, when really it doesn't even make that much of a difference. If you can see what happened in Manchester, there's the metal detectors, but you can just move it to the parking lot.
No,
That's an excellent point.
You can't let the concern of a threat just destroy everything.
Yeah, but you make a really good point, and that is if you create a police state as a reaction to fear, then that's ultimately what terrorists want.
They want to destroy our culture, and you're just doing it for them.
Hypersecurity has made soft terror spots right outside the checkpoints, like at the LA airport. Outside of every baseball game now, the lines snake outside for a half hour. That's the softest target you could possibly imagine.
And Buck Sexton pointed that out last night, and that's a really good point, because this false sense of security that you get from over securing a venue actually makes things much worse. All right, well, we're going to talk right now about the president And we are told he has tapped one of his longtime lawyers to help him with the investigation into his campaign's alleged ties to Russia. The Fox Business Network's Charlie Gasparino broke the story last night. As you know, former FBI Director Robert Mueller is leading the probe into accusations of collusion and obstruction of justice. Attorney Mark Krasowitz has worked for President Trump for years, and he's well known for sparring with reporters, so he should fit right in. Now, in the past, he has defended Trump in a number of real estate and fraud cases, but legal experts say this new case is far more complex and high profile than anything he's done before. So what does this mean for the investigation and the administration? What does this say to you about his choice of lawyer, that loyalty is greater than some sort of knowledge?
Well, absolutely. He has to have trust and the ability to have somebody who can speak back to him on points and have an honest discussion. But I would also make it clear, like, Kasowitz is the first of a team of legal people that are going to be defending Donald Trump. And it's important to make that distinction because White House counsel defends the office of the president. Yeah. But this is Donald Trump, and his organization needs to be defended because some of these investigations go back to private citizen Donald Trump before he got elected.
Yeah, absolutely, including in Trump Tower, where there were 2 Russian banks that were the subject of FISA memos. So John Brennan, a person whom I don't necessarily trust. You know, when we talk about the politicization of the deep state and of various intelligence organizations, I think you can really point to him first and foremost. But what did his testimony say to you? What do you think? What do you think Brennan's feeling about the ties between Russia and the Trump campaign?
He feels pretty strongly about them. He feels like there's definitely a there. He didn't seem to have a smoking gun. Yeah. But you know what I found out of his testimony that was most interesting was driving home the point of how incompetent he thinks Trump is to be trusted with intelligence. Yeah. And flying off half-cocked and basically saying, you know, we can share intelligence with the Russians, but there's a way to do it. There's a way to have it done through channels where things aren't lost in translation, and Trump is very good at messing things up in translation. So I thought that was a valued point that Brennan made in the midst of all the other stuff where he seemed to be indicating that there was untoward associations between Trump's campaign and the Russians.
I know, but I guess there's a difference between, you know, untoward associations, because the point is the Russians are going to try and screw with anyone. They're going to do whatever they can to influence people and get to know people in power to move the needle in their direction, favorably for them. And there's a big difference between that and screwing around with voting machines.
Yes. Yes.
And having some sort of a noticeable, measurable impact on the election. I guess that's what I'm looking for, basically, is data. Like, show me some proof. Show me some numerical proof that Russia did something here and that had the effect over here.
I don't really think that it had a measurable effect. Regardless, I'm interested to know, obviously, whether there's collusion or there's not collusion. Yeah. But it's gotten to the point where there's not really many people who feel that way. There's people who feel that way of, there's obviously collusion and we're going to find it, and how dare you're denying, and there's people who say, well, there's no collusion and this is a witch hunt and it's just 2 camps. Yeah. And everybody should be interested in whether there was or whether there wasn't. These hearings, he's saying maybe, but he doesn't have evidence yet either. I'm totally just saying, guess what? I don't know anything about how to investigate this kind of thing. And guess what? I don't have to. So I'm just going to wait and see. And so many people just aren't comfortable enough to do that. I don't know if they have a hard time being vulnerable.
I think people want the truth. Yeah, but everyone is giving their shaded version of events and acting like it's the truth.
The word hacked the election should just stop.
Well, what does it even mean?
What does it
mean? And by the way, John Podesta, don't use password as your password.
Really bad word.
All right, well, we gotta move along. The party panel is returning a little bit later. First up, President Trump tomorrow set to meet with NATO leaders, where he is expected to discuss the future of the alliance. One Republican senator criticizing a major military deal he made in one of his earlier stops. I'm going to talk about it with Ambassador John Bolton. That's next. All right, if you hate Uber, listen up. The transportation company has admitted that it allegedly underpaid its New York City drivers for years, and now will have to dish out an estimated 45 million clams in back payments. The Independent Drivers Guild reports that approximately 50,000 drivers will be receiving an average of $900 apiece. Woo! Will the company ever get out from under a dark cloud? The panel is back to discuss. Katherine Timpf, Anthony Fisher, and Glenn Hall. I think Uber has gone downhill. I think their quality control is awful. I think some of the people who show up to get you in dirty cars with nachos licking their fingers. That actually happened to me. I had one driver who was inebriated and tried to hug me at the end of the journey. That's when I smelled the booze.
Wow.
Glenn?
Oh, you were glad you didn't have to tip then, right?
Yeah. I said never pet a burning dog. Anyhow, so Uber's having a hard time. Why have they let their company just swirl down the toilet?
You know, it's really shocking.
They get a lot of money.
They get a lot of money. They've been very successful. Perhaps they've grown too fast. You know, a lot of times when you have this kind of a quick start from a startup to this size of a company, you don't necessarily have all the pieces in place that you need.
Yeah.
But this is still, this particular, you know, short changing of drivers in New York is pretty shocking, because this is a company that built its whole business on algorithms. And this was simple math that they were doing wrong.
Yeah. Anthony, I mean, there's a lot of competition nowadays, and a lot of these companies get started in big cities like New York, Chicago, and LA. Get, Lyft, Juno. I mean, there's so many who want to participate in the sharing economy, particularly the ride-sharing economy, and I think they're going to gobble Uber up.
I think they will, too. I mean,
your thoughts, darling?
I think that Uber was great about 4 years ago. I think the ride-sharing economy has made my life better and a whole lot of other people's lives better, but at every turn there seems to be some really awful bro culture, you know, within the company itself, and this kind of stuff is just unconscionable, like nickel and diming your own drivers.
Yeah.
Like, the whole point was that they're supposed to be better than the cab cartels, and I love that they crushed the cab cartels in a lot of these cities, but this is not a good replacement, and I've been finding myself searching around for other options as well. I've been using the other apps.
So what do drivers say when you talk to them? Do they say that they're treated better by other companies because they can move with their feet or their cars?
Well, I actually don't take Uber anymore.
What do you take?
I take anything else. I take Lyft, I take Get.
I saw you in a rickshaw.
Yeah, because my rating got so low that they weren't picking me up anymore. So it wasn't like me being high. Yo, true story. It wasn't me being high and mighty. It was me just, you know, not being an acceptable clientele. Apparently,
take the mighty out of it.
It wasn't really my fault. It wasn't. None of it was my fault. Sure. They won't pick me. They would, you know. But yeah.
When you barf in your own handbag, that shouldn't affect your rating.
I didn't even barf. That's the thing. I know plenty of people who have barfed and the car still picked them up. I think that'd be like a single issue thing if I were an Uber driver. No barfing. It's fine. Really, I wouldn't care about anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lyft, anything else, it doesn't matter. You're right. The cars are garbage. People are mean. I had a driver call me a B word, a spoiled B word, because I took a cab or an Uber to go 4 blocks in the rain. He was right, but you still don't talk to me like that.
It was raining.
It was. I didn't want to get wet.
Glenn, Anthony, and Kat, thank you for the best night of my life. I don't exaggerate, ever. All right, coming up, a new report claims the Trump administration is split on whether or not to send more American troops to Afghanistan. Retired Navy SEAL Leif Babin is here with his take